Hello everybody and welcome back to Book Club. I hope you enjoyed the last episode. I'm very happy to make this a reoccurring segment among my channel because I love books. And so do all of you. Thank you all for coming back today. Did you enjoy the last book? Did you enjoy the last discussion? I hope so. If you didn't, let me know down in the comments so I can help. And let me know down in the comments if you enjoyed the recommendation that I gave you for last episode. Speaking of last episode, I recommended a book that we were going to read today, this very day. In fact, I shouldn't say recommendation, I should say requirement. It's a requirement. If you didn't read it, you can't be here. Where's your pass? Come on, show me your pass. Show me your pass. And that book that we're going to be discussing today is White Noise by Don DeLillo. Don DeLillo. White Noise by Don DeLillo is a postmodernist fiction novel about a college professor named Jack Gladney, his wife Babette, and the rest of his family. Jack Gladney is a professor with his subject being Hitler studies, a fictional focus in college that does not exist. It's quite a comedic plot element that he teaches Hitler studies at a college, when in reality Hitler studies, I don't want to say is useless, but is a very bizarre thing to study in. And this leads me to my first point, that Don DeLillo has created a postmodernist satirical comedic novel here. This novel works in the dark comedy lane, giving very bizarre situational humor and also very satirical, ironic pokes at society in the way that people talk, in the way that people behave, and in the ways that people react to elements of life that we previously considered to be traditional or even modernist behavior. Postmodernism is a look back at all of that, everything in the past. Victorian era novels, modernist novels, Gothic fiction. It pokes fun at everything. Postmodernism is an art movement that takes a look back at everything that humanity created and makes fun of all of it. It doesn't take any prisoners, no holds barred on all fiction, including modernist ideas. Ideas such as nothing really matters. Basically pokes fun at that, saying, yeah, nothing really matters, but we can still have fun with that idea. Which brings us to White Noise, a book that's separated into three very different parts. The first part being Waves and Radiation, the second part being the Airborne Toxic Event, and the third part being Dilorama. All three of these parts have a very specific role to play in the overarching narrative of the story. And while we're getting into it and getting into my own personal opinions, I don't know about you guys, feel free to share your opinions here, but to me, I wasn't that impressed by the first section of this novel, being Waves and Radiation. I thought quite honestly that Waves and Radiation wasn't boring, as I feel like is a common criticism of this novel. I feel like people who aren't more invested in patient novels such as this, more narrative, character-driven, stream of consciousness novels that are embedded inside of this book, will definitely call this boring. But I wouldn't say it's boring, it's just not my cup of tea. You have the character of Jack Gladney talking about his life, talking about his relationship to his family, to his wife, to his friends, and to the college that he teaches at. He gives a series of blunt, surface-level observations about the life that he leads, about how basic and semi-boring that it is. It's your stereotypical college professor life, and it's very humorous, or I should say, that Don DeLillo attempts to bring a dry humor out of this in the way that Jack Gladney goes to the grocery store and buys similar things every time. By the way, the conversations that he has with his family and friends are kind of pointless and really bizarre and out of left field, but don't really have a point to bettering his life or making him a smarter or better man. Don DeLillo also makes a point that Jack Gladney teaches Hitler studies at a college but doesn't speak any German, and he keeps taking German lessons but can't learn it just due to the way that his mouth moves and the way that the German language is such a guttural, brutish language to learn. And all of this is meandering, I would say. I wouldn't say it's badly done. I get the point that Don DeLillo is trying to make here. It's not that I don't understand this work. The point of it is that it is supposed to be a slow burn. You're supposed to slowly grow to learn these characters and who they are. You're supposed to learn that Babette is scared of death, just as how Jack himself is also scared of death. They both say that they want to die first, even though, as is revealed later on in the book, neither wants to die at all, much less dies first. They're kind of lying to each other here. DeLillo makes a point to make sure that both Babette and Jack are lying and don't completely trust each other, even though they're quite obviously in love with each other, as you can tell through their conversations throughout the novel. My issues with this book comes in the form of the dialogue, I would say. The dialogue is consistently my most prominent issue throughout the entire thing, even the sections that I do quite enjoy. The dialogue comes off, and I don't like to say this word a lot. I really don't like to use this word because it makes me sound like an asshole, and I'm sorry guys, plug your ears, everyone plugs your ears. It seems a little pretentious. I don't like saying the word pretentious because it just comes off as the fact that the author isn't really trying, you know, but I can see that DeLillo really is trying with the dialogue. He seems like he's trying way too hard to make the character seem quirky and unrealistically silly. It's to a way that makes me disassociate with the novel. I can't really relate to any of these characters. I can't relate to the fear of death, which is the one theme that comes back and makes the novel thematically significant constantly all the way throughout it. But let me read some of the dialogue, for example, so that I can explain to you my main problem with this. For example, when Jack is having a conversation with his son Heinrich, Heinrich is going through a philosophical phase and is giving many counter arguments to things that Jack is telling him. He says things like, when Jack asks Heinrich if it's raining outside, Jack says, "You see it's raining," and Heinrich says, "You see the sun move across the sky, but is the sun moving across the sky or is the earth turning? You're so sure that's rain. How do you know it's not sulfuric acid from factories across the river? How do you know it's not a fallout from a war in China? You want an answer here and now? Can you prove here and now that this stuff is rain? How do I know that what you call rain is what I call rain? What is rain anyways?" And once again, I get the point. Heinrich is supposed to be semi-insufferable and be a teenager going through a philosophical phase, but I feel like people don't talk like that. Jack and Babette and Jack's friend are constantly going really long monologues about elements of life and the things they like and dislike, and monologues about the human condition. And this would really work if it fit the tone of the novel of being a satirical, ironic, very dry, dark humor with characters talking as people do in real life. But their long-winded, pseudo-intellectual monologues only serve to make me think this is an author writing through all the characters. All the characters talk the exact same to me, which is definitely a fault with writing. You want characters to sound differently, to speak differently, but they all sound like DeLillo speaking through all of these characters at once. I don't want to sound like I'm ragging on the novel too much because I did enjoy it overall. I did like this novel. I see why it's critically acclaimed, and that reason mainly comes into the second and the end of the third act. The Airborne Toxic Event is a thrilling, consistently engaging section of the novel where the Gladney family is escaping this airborne event, as the title says. It's action-packed, it's exciting, the way it describes driving, the way they're all packed into this camp, the way that they see how their normal, meandering, and regular lives are uprooted by this event is brilliant, I think, and it shows how it could happen to any of us and how a regular neighborhood would react to something like this. The tight-knit group becomes astray from each other. Everyone is having doubts. Everyone believes that they have this disease that the event caused and believe they have conditions, even though there's no real way to know about it, and it's all just hearsay at this point. I really enjoyed this section of the novel. I feel like all of the characters shine a little bit more here than they did in the first section. Heinrich's attitude becomes more prominent and it makes more sense why he's acting this way. Babette and Jack become more forward force, become more upfront, and you get more of their characters here. And mainly, the main thing that I appreciate about this is that the story and the plot has momentum. In the first act, it didn't have momentum, which I understand. It's what DeLillo was going for. He wanted to present life in an unspecial and meandering way, and he managed to do that. I just didn't like the dialogue. I didn't like how pretentious it all sounded to me. That's all I didn't like. I enjoyed this section. And the third section too, I would say I enjoyed overall, even though at the beginning it was more of the same. You had scenes of Jack going to a grocery store and his friend talking to him and saying, "Hey, isn't life just crazy the way human beings perceive death? It's so unrealistic how we perceive death. Perhaps we should just accept death for what it is." And it's just pointless. It's babbling. It goes on, and I feel like I get the point, and DeLillo doesn't have to keep repeating this element. But what I do really enjoy is the turn the story takes towards sort of a revenge thriller in a way. It's revealed that Gladney's wife, Babette, in order to subside her fears of dying, starts taking an experimental pill that she took from a man who produced the pill, and in exchange to get this pill, she slept with him. And Jack Gladney isn't really upset that he slept with her at first. In fact, his stream of consciousness, he's more angry that she's able to have her fear subsided. But when it's revealed that her fear isn't subsided and the pill doesn't work, that's when he becomes angry. That's when he realizes, wow, there's no hope here in getting rid of my fear of death. It's always going to be there. And when Jack goes to that man to murder him for sleeping with his wife, he's not really murdering him for sleeping with his wife. He's murdering him over the idea of sleeping with his wife and the idea of selling her a false thing. Jack never really emits any sort of true emotion like anger, aggravation, not even happiness or rage or spite. He's just doing it because it seems like the right thing to do. His friend tells him that the only way to truly conquer your fear of death is to accept that you don't have control over the fear of death. And to realize that you don't have control means that you can control others' fears. And if you kill another man, that's the only way you could possibly control death. Even if it is an unbelievably terrible way to control death, it's the only way to do it. And that's why Jack goes to kill the man. I feel like DeLillo's themes are very strong here. I do enjoy that last conversation between Jack Gladney and his friends. I do believe that the novel becomes very funny in the last act, where Jack goes to kill the man and he proceeds to shoot him, constantly saying, I'm gonna put a bullet in the chamber, then I'm gonna shoot him, then I'm gonna take the car to the garage, then I'm gonna shut it off, and they're gonna frame this guy. And he keeps going over and over again with the same plan, repeating the same plan over and over again in his head. And it just starts to crumble, and he realizes that life can't go according to a plan. And he proceeds to take this man that he shot, drive him to a hospital to a bunch of nuns. Nuns who, mind you, state that, yeah, we're nuns, but we don't believe in a God. That's all fairy tales to us. And he leaves him there, and he goes home. Jack's youngest son crosses a road, a highway of traffic, barely missing, only not dying based off of pure luck. They react, and the novel ends. I really love the ending. In fact, I would say the ending is what saves this entire novel, because my main other flaw that I have is that it isn't very funny. This novel is supposed to be a satirical, dark humor about the human condition and about how we all are hypocritical in the way that we talk to each other, even though we have deep, intrinsic fears about dying and about ourselves, and we're all very, very corrupt and self-conscious people. But all the conversations and all the action scenes and all the dialogue and the character interactions, I didn't find a single one funny until the end, which is what my main criticism is, other than I think that the dialogue and overall tone is slightly pretentious. Because if you are going to have a novel be a satirical dark humor, then you might need some darker humor than what's presented until the very end, you know? It seems that the second act and the end of the third act of the novel are the only portions that DeLillo truly excelled at. And when he excels, he does excel. It becomes a very interesting and compelling novel. But when you're in the meandering sections with all the characters talking to each other about their lives and about what they enjoy doing, I won't lie, it's not boring, but I don't think it's done to the extent that it could be done to. I think that DeLillo's dialogue sounds exactly like what DeLillo sounds like. I think it would serve him well to write more comedic scenes sprinkled throughout the novel to make it more prominent that this is a dark and satirical humor. I think he would serve him well to not do repetition as much as he commonly does in this novel, because it is a very repetitious work, which, once again, is the point. I just think that the point he's trying to make is not as exciting as it could be. I think this novel could have been better, but overall, I am glad I read it. There are some great portions of this novel. The climax, the second portion, the scene where Jack is involved with Babette's dad and he gives him a gun, I thought that section was also very good. And the themes are strong. The themes are quite strong. The idea of trying to escape death and the idea of having to give yourself something to be mad at. Like, the very idea of Jack killing a man or wanting to kill a man simply because he wants to control death is also a very strong theme that I don't see presented very much in any artistic medium. So yeah, I enjoyed the content of it. I didn't really enjoy the way in which it was presented, I should say. And the way in which it was presented is kind of the main part of the novel. But still, if I was going to give this novel a rating, I would give White Noise by Don DeLillo a 6 out of 10. That's not a bad rating, that is above average. I think this is an above average book that had a lot of work put into it. I just think that the work put into it is a tad bit more pretentious than I would have liked it to be. I am going to give you a recommendation though. If you did enjoy White Noise by Don DeLillo, much more than I maybe, I would recommend The Anthologist by Nicholson Baker. It's a novel presented in a very similar way. The entire book is a stream of possibly the most stream of consciousness novel I've ever read in my life, presented by this author desperately trying to write a book. It is also an ironic, satirical comedy. It also breaks the fourth wall constantly, considering it's a novel about someone trying to write a novel. If you enjoyed the more meandering, more repetitive parts of White Noise, that's something you did like, which I get. That's something a lot of people do like. You'll love The Anthologist. Heck, I like The Anthologist a little more than White Noise even. And if you loved White Noise, you will love The Anthologist. That's a Jesse promise. All right, guys, what did you think about White Noise? Be sure to comment down below. I will appreciate and love all of your responses and all of your agreements and disagreements with me. If you disagree, that's fine, because I know my opinion isn't the popular opinion. I accept that. That's just what I got out of it, and it's why I made this video, to not lie, but to be honest about what I got. If you got much more, that's great, and please tell me why. Alright guys, sorry if this video was a little bit more negative than I intended to, but I was just being honest about the book that was presented. I love this book club, and here's my recommendation for next week. My recommendation for next week is going to be the novel No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. I'm very excited to talk about this novel with you next week. Be sure to read it, and I will see you then. Love you guys. Bye-bye.